18th lesson. A proposed trip across the United States. Time, an afternoon several days later.
What a perfectly delightful drive this has been. I never believed the countryside could look so beautiful in November.
Yes, although it's not so spectacular as it was about a month ago, when the leaves were at the peak of their color.
I have seen picture postcards where the autumn leaves were actually red and orange. Are they really as bright as that?
Sometimes they are even brighter, and it looks as if all the forests were on fire. But the countryside has a great deal of charm even now, don't you think? Yes, it's just as I pictured New England would be. The lovely white church steeples, the meadows and rolling hills, and the charming red barns.
Say, we seem to be going right into one of those delightful red barns. Are we stopping here, Bill?
Yes. Don't you all feel like having a little lunch now? This inn, which probably was an old barn at one time, is famous for its authentic New England cooking.
What a good idea, Bill. I was so intrigued with the landscape that I had forgotten it was lunchtime. But now that you mention it, the cold, crisp air has really sharpened my appetite.
Mine, too. Do you think they'll have some of that delicious turkey I have seen advertised everywhere?
No doubt they will have it. Stuffed turkey is traditional in New England, especially around Thanksgiving time, when it almost becomes the national dish.
5 minutes later, lunch has been ordered, and our friends are seated at a round wooden table admiring the interior of the old inn. This place does remind one of colonial times in the history of this country. Have you noticed the huge fireplace with the old iron pot and the dry husks of corn?
All of these things belong to a time when Thanksgiving meant much more than a large dinner and indigestion. Wasn't Thanksgiving originally the holiday when the New England Pilgrims gave thanks to God for their first successful harvest?
That's right, Maria. And the dry corn husks should remind you that it was the Indians who introduced this crop to the early settlers. The Indians were very friendly at that time, and in Virginia, one of their princesses, Pocahontas, is said to have married an English colonist.
Virginia? But that's not very near here, is it?
Of course not, my dear. We are now in New England, which is north of New York. Virginia is several hundred miles to the south.
I can see that our proposed trip across the United States is going to serve as a very practical lesson in geography.
While we are waiting for that turkey to arrive, why don't we go over a few of the high spots of your trip, so that Maria will have a better idea of what to expect?
That's a good suggestion, Bill. But as a matter of fact, we haven't yet decided on any of the details of the trip. All I know is that we are first going to Washington.
Well, if you go by bus or train, you could stop off at Philadelphia, one of the oldest cities and once the capital of the United States. And you could also make a side trip to Camden, New Jersey, the home of Walt Whitman.
How did you guess I was a Whitman fan, Bill?
Oh, that's easy. I can always guess the favorite authors of my friends. Now, Jose is definitely an admirer of Mark Twain.
Why, that's incredible, Bill. You are right again. You know, we are even planning to take a riverboat up the Mississippi so that I can get a deeper understanding of some of Mark Twain's wonderful novels.
And I bet if you go to California, Maria will be reminded of Steinbeck.
You are probably right, Bill. But after Washington, we are going to Chicago. We don't want to miss the second largest city in the United States and the fifth largest in the world.
If you are flying there from Washington, I hope you'll go by day so that you can get some idea of what the Midwest looks like. Between here and Chicago lies one of the world's greatest industrial regions. Beyond Chicago, stretching to the Rockies, there is an endless fertile plain, punctuated by such cities as Omaha, Wichita, and Kansas City, where 100 years ago you could still hunt herds of buffalo. By the way, you should get your hotel reservations for Chicago well in advance, since it's a great convention center, and even its enormous hotels occasionally have no room.
We'll be sure to do that, Bill. And after Chicago, where would you advise us to go? I know that there are so many attractions in this country that we can't hope to see them all, but we want to choose wisely.
You, as an engineer, Jose, would be interested in some of the enormous dams that are being constructed on the big rivers of our Northwest. But I think Maria might be more interested in visiting such natural wonders as Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Canyon of Colorado.
But you mustn't become so pleased with our national parks that you never get to the West Coast.
Don't worry, there's no danger of that. We are actually very anxious to see California, but we plan to take several side trips by bus in order to see something more of the Rockies.
What part of California do you want to visit first?
San Francisco, by all means. Jose has a strong wish to see the Golden Gate Bridge and the San Francisco Harbor, and I am just as anxious to explore the steep streets and quaint shops and restaurants of the city. You mustn't fail to visit San Francisco's famous Chinatown. You can also go to the opera, since the season should be starting soon. San Francisco has a highly developed cultural life, with more concerts and bookshops than any other city its size in the country.
'18th lesson continued.
Yes, I just hope our trip doesn't stop there. You know, I am very anxious to get to Southern California as well. They say the climate there is somewhat similar to what we are used to. Sunshine every day and clear blue skies. And I know we'll find lots of Spanish influence in the architecture and even in the lives of the people.
I wouldn't be too sure of that. Southern California has a hard-working movie industry, and there may not be as much time for leisure as you imagine. But I think you can still find many fine old Spanish missions all over California.
Speaking of the movie industry, Bill, I have been trying to find Hollywood on the map, but without any success whatever. Can you tell me why?
Certainly. Hollywood is only one of many suburbs of the city of Los Angeles. Although for many people here and abroad, it's probably the most important part.
I should think that visiting a motion picture studio could be a real treat for both of you. Maria, I know, would love to see some of the stars in action, and Jose should be very interested in the mechanics of movie production. Naturally, we intend to visit at least some of the studios, as well as Beverly Hills and Malibu Beach.
I like movie stars, and I do not wish to detract from them. But I am also interested in the ones in the sky. I understand that some of the best observatories in the world are to be found in Southern California.
Yes, I agree with Jose, and I would certainly visit Mount Wilson or Palomar Observatory if I were going to California.
What about a side trip to Las Vegas?
The state of Nevada is next door to California, and many people drive to Las Vegas from Los Angeles for a weekend. You could do that if you have the time.
And the money. Don't worry, Pilar. Jose and I don't intend to gamble, at least not on a large scale, but we would like to take in some of the floor shows and other nightclub entertainments. I understand that many popular Broadway actors are now performing there.
Why is it that everything in the West seems to be larger than anywhere else? They have the biggest stars, the highest mountains, the largest trees.
Yes, we must see the famous California redwoods and sequoias.
And my mouth is watering already for some of those delicious California oranges and grapefruits. By the way, Bill, do you think we'll have to wait much longer for dinner?
Why, we've only been here a few minutes, Jose. I see that the mere mention of food makes you hungrier. Not that I want to tease you, but the steaks in Texas are famous throughout the country. Some people think that Texas beef is the best in the world.
Yes, I can hardly wait to get to Texas and see some real cowboys in action. I have always had the suspicion that they were an invention of Hollywood.
How skeptical you are. No, you can still see a genuine rodeo in some parts of Texas. But you may see more cowboys if you drive through New Mexico and Arizona.
Yes, we do intend to take a bus from California to Texas and pass through Monument Valley. I have brought a camera loaded with color film, and I think that would be the best place to use it.
You must save a few films for picturesque San Antonio with its Spanish governor's palace. When I was there a few years ago, I was thoroughly delighted with the place. It is a perfect example of an 18th century Spanish home.
But I suppose that big 20th century cities like Dallas and Houston are more typical of this state.
Yes, but we're not always looking for what is typical of the 20th century. Sometimes we even try to escape it. Aren't we planning a special detour by way of New Orleans, just to have a glimpse of that 19th century charm which is so rapidly disappearing all over the world?
I had no idea you were planning to visit New Orleans. Couldn't you manage to get there in February, when the famous Mardi Gras takes place? They say it is very much like the carnival celebrations at Rio de Janeiro and on the Riviera.
I don't know whether we can get to New Orleans at just that time, but we certainly intend to sample some of the famous French and Creole cooking of its vieux carré.
Don't forget that we also intend to visit Florida, Miami Beach, the Everglades, St. Augustine, and we want to leave enough time for exploring some of the southern mansions as well.
Yes, I forgot to mention while I was making my analysis of literary tastes that I knew Maria was also a Faulkner fan.
This time you are wrong, Bill. It's true that I would love to visit some of the South's beautiful pillared mansions and splendid gardens, but this does not mean that I like Faulkner. As a matter of fact, I much prefer the old school of writers like Poe and some of the New England poets like Longfellow, Whittier, and Bryant.
You know, I was just thinking that this old inn makes me feel much closer to New England poets, such as Frost and Emily Dickinson.
And I was thinking how good this trip of ours is going to be for my sense of American geography. I had not realized until now how large the United States really is, nor how broadly scattered the scenic attractions are. I can see how handy it would be to own a private airplane.
Much as I would like to own a plane myself, Maria, I really don't think it's necessary in this country. From what I've seen of the highways, traveling should be very fast and pleasant. And think of how much more we'll see than from a plane.
I know you won't mind this interruption of your planning, Jose, but if I am not mistaken, the waitress is now coming with our turkey.